I don't think I can add any input to this that is, I guess you could say, anything of value to what Salman Khan has to say, but I just wanted to say that I agreed with his TED Talk entirely. I'm so fucking done with our system. It is dysfunctional.
I'm here today to talk about two ideas.
And this is why our schools are failing.
That, at least based on my observations at Khan Academy, are kind of the core, the key leverage points for learning. And it's the idea of mastery and the idea of mindset. And I saw this in the early days when I was working with my cousins. A lot of them were having trouble with math at first because they had all these gaps accumulated in their learning. And because of that, at some point they got to an algebra class and they might have been a little bit shaky on some of the pre-algebra. And because of that, they thought they didn't have the math gene, or they'd get to a calculus class and they'd be a little bit shaky on the algebra. I saw in the early days when I was uploading up some of those videos on YouTube, and I realized that people who were not my cousins were watching. And you know, at first those comments were just simple thank yous, and I thought that was a pretty big deal. I don't know how much time y'all spend on YouTube. Most of the comments are not thank you.
I gotta get something of it into the productive section where I'm actually learning something.
You're a little edgier than that. But then the comments got a little bit more intense. Student after student saying that they had grown up not liking math. It was getting difficult as they got into more advanced math topics. By the time they got to algebra, they had so many gaps in their knowledge that they just couldn't engage with it. And they thought that they didn't have the math gene. But when they were a little bit older, they took a little bit of agency and they decided to engage. They found resources like Khan Academy, and they were able to fill in those gaps and master those concepts, and that reinforced their mindset that it wasn't fixed, that they actually were capable of learning mathematics. And in a lot of ways, this is how you would master a lot of things in life. It's the way that you would learn a martial art. In a martial art, you would practice the white belt skills as long as necessary, and only when you've mastered it, you would move on to become a yellow belt. It's the way that you would learn a musical instrument. You practice the basic piece over and over again, and only when you've mastered it, you go on to the more advanced one. But what we point out, this is not the way that a traditional academic model is structured, the type of academic model that most of us grew up in.
And it's
in a traditional academic model,
like
we group students together,
it's broken
usually by
it doesn't work
age.
Like
and
that. And how we do it doesn't work, period. And this is a big chunk of why it's broken.
On middle school age
and it is failing.
And perceived ability. And we shepherd them all together at the same pace. And what typically happens, let's say we're in a middle school pre-algebra class and the current unit is on exponents. The teacher will give a lecture on exponents, then we'll go home, do some homework. The next morning we'll review the homework, then we'll get another lecture, homework. That'll continue for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then we get a test. And on that test, maybe I get a 75%, maybe you get a 90%, maybe you get a 95%. And even though that test has identified gaps in our knowledge, I didn't know 25% of the material. Even the A student, what was the 5% they didn't know? Even though we've identified those gaps, the whole class will then move on to the next subject. Probably a more advanced subject that's going to build on those gaps. It might be logarithms or negative exponents. And that process continues. And you immediately start to realize how strange this is. I didn't know 25% of the more foundational thing, and now I'm being pushed to the more advanced thing. And this will continue for months, and it'll continue for years, all the way to at some point I might be in an algebra class or a trigonometry class, and I hit a wall. And it's not because algebra is fundamentally difficult or because the student isn't bright. It's because I'm seeing an equation and they're dealing with exponents, and that 30% that I didn't know is showing up. And then I start to disengage.
Exactly.
And to appreciate how absurd that is, imagine if we did other things in our life that way.
Yeah.
Say home building.
Yeah.
So we bring in the contractor, say, told we have 2 weeks to build the foundation, do what you can. So they do what they can. Maybe it rains, maybe some of the supplies don't show up. And 2 weeks later, the inspector comes, looks around, says, okay, the concrete's still wet right over there. That part's not quite up to code. I'll give it an 80%. Say, great, that's a C, let's build the first floor. Same thing. We have 2 weeks, do what you can. Inspector shows up in 2 weeks, it's a 75%. Great, that's a D+. Second floor, third floor. And all of a sudden, while you're building the third floor, that whole structure collapses. And if your reaction to that is the reaction that you typically have in education, or that a lot of folks have in education, you might say, maybe we had a bad contractor, or maybe we needed better inspection or more frequent inspection. But what was really broken was the process. We were artificially constraining how long we had to do something, pretty much ensuring a variable outcome. And we took the trouble of inspecting and identifying those gaps, but then we built right on top of it. So the idea of mastery learning is to do the exact opposite. Instead of artificially constraining when and how long, fixing when and how long you work on something, pretty much ensuring that variable outcome, the A, B, C, D, F, and do it the other way around. What's variable is when and how long a student actually has to work on something, and what's fixed is that they actually master the material. And it's important to realize that not only will this make the student learn their exponents better, but it will reinforce the right mindset muscles. It makes them realize that if you got 20% wrong on something, it doesn't mean that you have a C branded in your DNA somehow. It means that you should just keep working on it. You should have grit. You should have perseverance. You should take agency over your learning. Now, a lot of skeptics might say, well, hey, this is all great. Philosophically, this whole idea of mastery-based learning and its connection to mindset, students taking agency over their learning, makes a lot of sense, but it seems impractical. To actually do it with students, it seems like every student would be on their own track. It would have to be personalized. You would have to have private tutors. You'd have to work worksheets for every student. And there were experiments. These aren't new ideas. There were experiments in Winnetka, Illinois 100 years ago where they did mastery-based learning. And they saw great results, but they said it wouldn't scale because it was logistically difficult. And the teacher had to give different worksheets to every student, give on-demand assessments. But now today, it's no longer impractical. We have the tools to do it. Students need an explanation at their own time and pace. Well, there's on-demand video for that. They need practice. They need feedback. Well, there's adaptive exercises. It's readily available for students. And when that happens, all sorts of neat things happen. One, the students can actually master the concepts, but they're also building their growth mindset. They're building their grit, their perseverance. They're taking agency over their learning. And all sorts of beautiful things can start to happen in the actual classroom. Instead of it being focused on the lecture, students can interact with each other. They can get deeper mastery over the material. They can go into simulation, Socratic dialogue. And to appreciate what we're talking about and kind of the tragedy of lost potential here, I'd like to give a little bit of a thought experiment. If we were to go 400 years into the past, to Western Europe, which even then was one of the more literate parts of the planet, you would see that about 15% of the population knew how to read. And I suspect that if you ask someone who did know how to read, say a member of the clergy, what percentage of the population do you think is even capable of reading? And they might say, well, with a great education system, maybe 20 or 30%. But if you fast forward to today, we know that prediction would have been wildly pessimistic, that it's pretty close to 100% of the population is capable of reading. But if I were to ask you a similar question, what percentage of the population do you think is capable of truly mastering calculus, or understanding organic chemistry, or being able to contribute to cancer research? A lot of y'all might say, well, with a great education system, maybe 20, 30%. But what if that estimate is just based on your own experience in a non-mastery framework, your own experience with yourself or observing your peers, where you're being pushed at this set pace through classes, accumulating all these gaps. Even when you got the A, that 95%, what was that 5% that you missed? And it keeps accumulating all the way that you get to a more advanced class, and all of a sudden you hit a wall and say, oh, I'm not meant to be a cancer researcher. I'm not meant to be a physicist. I'm not meant to be a mathematician. And I suspect that actually is the case, but if you were allowed to be operating in a mastery framework, if you were allowed to really take agency over your learning, and when you get something wrong, embrace it, view that failure as a moment of learning, that number of the percent that could really master calculus or understand organic chemistry is actually a lot closer to 100%. And this isn't even just a nice to have. I think it's a social imperative. We're exiting what you could call the industrial age, and we're going into this, information revolution. And it's clear that some things are happening. In the industrial age, society was a pyramid. And at the base of the pyramid, you had a large pool you needed human labor. In the middle of the pyramid, you had kind of an information processing, a bureaucracy class. And at the top of the pyramid, you had your owners of capital and your entrepreneurs and your creative class. But we know what's happening already as we go into this information revolution. The bottom of that pyramid, automation is going to take over. Even that middle tier, information processing, that's what computers are good at. So as a society, we have a question. All this new productivity is happening because of this technology, but who participates in it? Is it just going to be the very top of the pyramid, in which case, what does everyone else do? How do they operate? Or do we do something that's more aspirational? Do we actually attempt to invert the pyramid, where you have a large creative class, where almost everyone can participate as an entrepreneur, an artist, as a researcher? And I don't think that this is utopian. I really think that this is all based on the idea of we let people tap into their potential by mastering concepts, by being able to exercise agency over their learning, that they can get there. And from when you think of it as just a citizen of the world, it's pretty exciting. When you think about the type of equity we can have and the rate at which civilization could even progress. And so I'm pretty optimistic about it. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting time to be alive. Thank you.
Anyways, I agree with him in a big way, and I'm angry about it at this point. I'm just mad because, to me, it's so... I've had a deep harboring suspicion that something was wrong with the whole fucking system for a long time. And, I'm starting to get articulate about why. I'm starting to realize that it's just fucked. Completely fucked up what we do, and how we do this and such. And so, yeah, here I am. I was, at the beginning, it's TX, text, what is that, and then found out it was Texas's, requirements and everything from the state of Texas to master this stuff. God, not a big fan of the state, but, let's... High Texas government, right there, you're way too conservative for my taste, but, yeah, here I am scaling up, Anyways, I've just started. I'm going to try to have this set up. I'm going to have to try to get into the other room to set up my Linux box all over again and get Gen 2 up and running in it and get it up on ZFS, but yeah. Yep, I've got two 14 terabyte hard drives coming too on eBay. Just wow. Anyways, getting into my, because I'm trying to go over to ReFS some Windows 2 on this Windows machine. So there you go. Advertising. Why did I go into selling? I wanted the summary page. Like, lots and lots of data, available to yours truly just very soon. Just plenty of space. I'm going to be able to build a 28, terabyte, cathedral of pirated content. Anyways, yeah, Salman Khan is absolutely right about this. Our system is broken. It's fucking broken. It's man. I mean, that's what I was experiencing in the college classrooms when it came to that stuff. It's like I bombed out on a subject, and then it was just like, all right, on to the next. And it was like, fuck! So anyways, I don't think I guess the thing that I started to realize at the end of the day, after I was done with all of this, was I'm not bad at math. This is a shit system. And I was just starting to get to that point. I was like, what was going through and everything is that I'm not bad at math. I'm not actually bad at math. I have to try to cope with a system that is broken. It doesn't do the job it's supposed to do. And then I learned why so many kids are so skeptical of college,
Because it's just this is funny to me because now as somebody with like firsthand experience of it and debts that I have to pay off as a result of all of it and all this other stuff, I'm just like sitting there. What did I fucking pay you for? Like at my professor, like what would what a waste, and everything just to find out all this other stuff and to realize, in those courses and everything. Oh man. For one thing, if I can test higher, I can just place out of all of these subjects in college and everything, and not have to, to mire at this level in the system, and to take these remedial courses, to get into the soldering labs and everything, and to get into the lab to actually work on computers and soldering stuff and all that other stuff that I really wanted to get into, microelectronics and all this other wonderfulness, and just this hobby of mine that I want to explore at a much greater level, to be able to like solder parts onto boards to take over and make them do something they original manufactured and intended them to do, like mod shipping and all that other great stuff that I did when I was a teenager, and reconnecting with that part of myself and everything, and getting better at repair also of broken electronics. Like, man, anyways, I need these algebra skills because I'm gonna need to be able to like understand the input from oscilloscope. So here I am, like, oh, this sucks, but suck it up, and you can psychologically, you can see. I've made a discovery about my own motivations, right? So, simple Pomodoro timer. So, anyways, now I'm having trouble motivating myself to do something, so here I go. I can hit the tomato button and put 30 minutes on the clock. Right, now I may have some resistance in me. I may feel, God, this sucks, I'm going to have trouble with all this, but, here we go. Anyways, just, letting you know that there's a Pomodoro timer that goes off in about 30 minutes. I can put 30 minutes on the clock and then commit that to studying every time I go to study. And with that, as a result of having that, I may be able to tell myself, well, I don't feel like doing it today. I'm having trouble. I just feel like death today. I don't really want to go through this process. I know that this is temporary. I'll get over it, but I just don't. Right now, I'm having a big wall of resistance towards doing something. And then I'll start to look at the Pomodoro clock, and I'll think it's just 30 minutes, day. It's just 30 minutes, day. It's just 30 minutes, day. Now, that's not my legal name, but that's what I tend. Anyways, not Dave, but Day, D-A-E. Anyways, so yeah, that's me and everything, and yeah, I'm going through it. I'm learning about the domain of a function, like, woo, big, yeah, not, like, who cares, sort of emotion. But yeah, our system's broken, man, and what Salman Khan had to say is a big part of it. It's just this is an insane. It's insane. What are we doing as a society? Like, why? Yeah. Anyways, we know from polyglots, that if they hadn't been able to make mistakes, they never would have learned. So we've created a system that penalizes people for making mistakes. How dysfunctional. Like the rest of you, I believe the system is too broken to be fixed. I believe it is a broken education system. I do. I totally agree with you. The U.S. education system is broken. But the problem with saying it's broken is that we need to get to the root causes of why it's broken. We need to start to understand what exactly is going wrong with the American education system, because it's not good enough, fundamentally, to just say the system is broken. We need to figure out why it broke in the first place. And I've been looking for, to a huge extent, solutions to the fact that it happens to be broken. One reform that is near and dear to my heart that I would propose as the educational revolutionary that I started identifying as publicly fund Montessori schools so that everybody has access to them, not just the rich. I would like to thank Jeff Bezos for the donations that he made to Montessori schools and everything as well. Philanthropers are very useful in this regard. Now, in particular, I would also say that there's a lot of studies to the effect that black students and the students that we traditionally think of as struggling students and people that are on the wrong end of the achievement gap tend to do better inside Montessori education facilities. To a big extent, Maria Montessori was a doctor. She was a scientist, and so she was able to do research, getting to the bottom, of what was the most effective way for these students to learn, to conduct experiments, to figure out what worked for the student and for the child. They were able to follow the child. They were able to figure out what the child needed and then offer the supports to the child that the child needed to master the subject. And this is just so fundamentally different from what we do in our education system that we've got. It's fairly, factory floor model. You're just shuffling people through. It is so broken. And like I said, I believe the Prussian system is too fucking broken to be fixed. You can't repair it. You just have to build a new system.